So we're going to start at the beginning of Dvorak, which is like a choir.
Having previously worked on ensemble balance and blend through a series of vocal warm-ups, we dove into the opening chorale without saying anything to assess whether these concepts would transfer naturally to instrumental playing. They did not. The ensemble played with the same timidness of previous rehearsals, and intonation continued to suffer because of it. After adjusting a balanced detail in the winds, I asked the strings to ignore the written dynamic, knowing that they would suddenly play more in tune and more in tone. It was clear from their expressions that they felt much better about this version, but how to do it pianissimo. I reminded them to consider those elements of playing that they could control to match one another: vibrato, bow placement, and low pressure. Had I more time, I would have asked individual pairs across the ensemble to practice blending a specific segment, allowing for peer evaluation and discussion. Already, there was improvement in terms of tone and intonation, and you could hear more or less the two lines between the melody and the viola descending chromatic, which they had not done before.
That wasn't clear. That was good. Make sure you hold that note in the fifth bar, fourth bar for 2 full 8 minutes. Can you go from the beginning again?
I went back to the beginning so that the lower strings could have a second try at grasping this feeling of blend in pianissimo. I did, however, forget to mention that objective before we started, so this time I tried to adjust by using physical cues in my left hand to bring out the viola's descending chromatic. And then we went on for the sake of playing, because I think they need to play as often as they can.
Sorry. Let's just start at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 after. This is the rhythm entrance.
I recovered from a messed up cue by stopping and restarting quickly, and while I was hoping to work on the same chorale techniques here, I realized that there were no oboes, which is rather unfortunate for this piece that revolves around them. But I kept going because the bassoons came in, and we could target those concepts together. And since they were rather well, we went on. The conducting here is not reflecting what's happening in the music, which is rather unfortunate. I think in the future I should have planned for more expression in my own gestures. I need to prepare cues in advance and really reflect what's happening in the tone of the piece. Here, I stopped to address intonation in the cello solely, and I decided it would be rather fun and beneficial for them to go back and review some of those vocal techniques, as you'll see in a second.
Sing it. Yeah? You have to be able to sing your parts. If you can't sing what you play, you're not going to play it very well, for the record. You can't play, you can't sing that kind of stuff, but you can sing melodies. Let's go from, let's move ahead and go to the Allegro molto, which is also an E minor, so let's tune E minor. Cool.
I decided to move ahead because we were short on time, and again, I think they should play as much as they can. Throughout this section, I was listening for pitch, for accuracy, which were both a little bit off here and there.
Just the strings? I don't like it one time? Just hold your first bar.
I decided to isolate the chords and the strings because they were very out of tune. So we played note by note, and I gave vocal feedback, actually. Instead of just telling them you're sharp, you're flat, I tried to sing their pitch and tune to see if they could come and find the matching tone. We went on note by note, but I completely forgot to tell them exactly how I was going to proceed through this section. So there was confusion, and I had to stop at the moving notes.
Okay. Let's go from that part. Actually, no. Let's do woodwinds. 1, 2, 3, 4.
I decided to move on to the woodwinds since they had been sitting so patiently for so long. I completely forgot to give them something to do during the opening exercises. But this time I remembered to tell them we're going note by note. And there was some stumbling in the cues, but it seemed to work out okay.
Can you sing it?
And at this point there was some confusion with a question inside the ensemble itself. But they were a little more reticent to sing in general. And I think that's because I used words like could. Sometimes I have to remember not to ask and be a little more authoritative, which is against my nature. But they could sing the rhythm rather well and in tune, so I moved on and challenged the strings to do the same. Part of the reason I also went to the woodwinds and came back is I wanted to challenge them to keep pitch inside of their ear. Pitch memory is very important, I think, in ensemble playing. And it didn't go very well, so they had to pluck their first notes, and that's totally fine. And they were able to sing. And without saying so, I just went on, and we performed this piece as a choir. And we had some surprising success in the violin moving notes.
With confidence, sing forte. 1, 2, ready, and.
Little by little, there was more buy-in into the singing, which I had a lot of resistance against in the beginning. And we just moved, without really talking, into playing what they had done. And the concepts seemed to be transferring very naturally between the singing and the instrumental playing at this point. Coming up are some pretty rough chords in the winds. So I decided to stop, especially since the brass had not really been active up to this point.
39, it looks like? Measure 39. Ready? 39? It's the, yeah. The long note.
I listened to see if they were able to balance and tune these chords on their own. I was a little bit confused, being less familiar with the score than I should have been. But I tried to give physical cues again to adjust the intonation rather than having to stop and discuss every chord. And we tried to sing it, which they had a lot of fun doing, finally. And the strings were paying attention. They even caused some laughter, and someone asked whether the idea was to feel pain,
Not to feel pain, to be able to hear the notes.
which obviously was not the case. So we tried to play it again. Although there was some confusion in terms of where to begin, you could hear there was already improvement in the pitch. And they were starting to play more confidently, as well, which was very exciting. Beneath the din of the brass, the violins had started to fall apart. So I pulled the ensemble to a stop, and without pointing out exactly where we were first, I sang to them the part that they misplayed. That way they heard it played correctly and in tune. Well, sung, not played. And I challenged them to do the same. It helped them play it with better rhythm and better pitch, and then we tried to put it back into context. It's a little clumsy, but I think that was my fault in terms of being clear on where we were starting.
So when you're practicing, really listen for where you're going so that you can
I also made it a point to teach them how to practice this way. What to listen for when you are alone and you want to sing through your part. Then we went back to play. We ended rehearsal this way. We didn't do any more teaching. We just played through the segments we had worked on to achieve a synthesis. And because I think every good rehearsal ends with play.